Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be talking about some of the rumored upcoming nerfs to the Eldari and where we are going to go after them. So if you guys have been kind of following up on when the nerfs are set to drop, the balanced data slate is due to drop the first or second week of September, which means we don't have a whole lot of time left. We have about 2 weeks until the first week of September. Maybe if we're lucky, 3. Now, these are rumors. I just want to be straight up with you guys and just as straight up as I can be. We don't know that these are 100% confirmed. However, the last time we got a set of leaks for the Eldar, it turns out they were pretty much 100% correct. So I believe that these are probably pretty close, if not exactly the same as what we're going to see when the balanced data slate drops. Now, I will be very happy if that doesn't happen, because obviously I think Eldar are in a pretty perfect place right now. I don't think they need to be touched at all. But as we know, GW is, kind of, they're not really the smartest when it comes to knowing how to balance the Eldar, and they usually either hit the Eldar way too hard or, in some cases, they just miss some things completely and it gets out of control. And we've seen this, in the beginning of 10th edition, and we've seen it again a couple of other times. So this time around, I think Eldar are finally in a really good spot. But of course, GW has to mess that up. So they will be interfered with. Now, for some context about how the Eldari have been performing in competitive play, if we look at a broad spectrum accounting of Eldar in general have been pretty middle of the road, right? I think we're at a 47 or 48% win rate in all, and I don't think that is a very alarming number for balance purposes. Meanwhile, armies like Death Guard and Imperial Knights and stuff like that have been hovering above 55%, and they've accumulated dozens of GT wins. The Eldar, on the other hand, have been much lower. Having said that, the Eldari do have a favorable matchup into Death Guard and into Knights, specifically because of Fuegan and Fire Dragons, which are one of the best and most guaranteed anti-large units in the entire game. However, you do pay a very big premium for them. Currently, they are 435 points. So that is the trade-off. If you want to kill big knights and you want to do that turn after turn, you're going to have to spend at least 435 points on your Fire Dragons, Wave Serpent, and Fuegan combo. And there are ways to just shut that down, right? And if anybody was watching the WTC, as I was, a lot of the Eldar players that were running Fire Dragons, they didn't win all their games. Let's just put it that way. The Eldar were not dominating the meta of the WTC, although they did have a good showing, and I do think that they obviously did win games, and it was really cool to see the Eldar in action at the WTC, but they were by no means a force that was totally dominating every player and every army. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing the current state of the game and the upcoming balance data slate. We're going to be talking about the rumored Eldar points nerfs. No news on the rules nerfs just yet, so that is a good sign at least. They're not going to touch our rules anymore. And we're going to be talking about what the nerfs mean if they are true and how to adapt accordingly, which luckily I think there is some light at the end of the tunnel here because we have several things that we can easily do to adapt to the changes. All right, so let's talk about the current state of the game and the upcoming balance data slate. So right now, as a lot of you guys are painfully aware, the meta is dominated by Death Guard primarily, and then shortly behind them is Knights and Chaos Knights, who combined have the most GT wins under their belts. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the top 3 factions had more GT wins and podiums than every other faction in the game combined over the last 3 months. So basically, since they've been OP, they have gotten the lion's share of GT wins. Now, this has changed the meta quite considerably. Most other factions in competitive play absolutely have to have an answer to the top armies, or they just get absolutely wrecked, right? If you cannot kill a large knight in a single turn of shooting and your list does not have the tools to do that, you will lose, and you will lose very bad. If you don't have the units required to trade effectively against blight drones and plague burst crawlers and all of those other disgusting, death guard kind of contraptions, then you will lose very quickly, right? If you don't have an answer to those types of things, you're gone. You're going to lose. And it's not going to be a fun game either. It's going to be a game that just feels like a drag. Now, speaking of factions that have these tools to deal with some of the top armies, in come the Eldari. Now, we happen to have a pretty good matchup into the top factions. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong. You can very well lose these games. It's not a guarantee. It's not like back in the day when if you brought Eldar to a tournament at the beginning of 5th edition, it's funny that I'm saying back in the day now, but, if you brought an Eldar army with a couple of Wraith Knights, you won that tournament. It was that simple, right? It's no longer the case. Eldar are a very difficult army to play, and I've seen several matchups between Eldar and Knights that have gone the Knights' way, or Eldar and Death Guard that have gone the Death Guard way, right? Just because the Eldar player maybe makes one tiny mistake, one error in positioning that the Death Guard player can take advantage of, and the Eldar player is in a bad spot. So, yes, they have a decent matchup into these factions. No, it is not a guarantee that they're going to win. And the reason why we have that good matchup is because of things like Fire Dragons, which are very reliable anti-large units. They're expensive, and most of the time they aren't going to trade up. But against Death Guard and, Chaos and Imperial Knights, they can do enough damage to their units so that it's kind of more cost effective. Swooping Hawks are also very good into these targets because Swooping Hawks deal mortal wounds, which can pretty much get past things like bloat drones, right? If you throw 10 grenades into a bloat drone and then shoot it with 10 Hawks and then move block the rest of their army with your 32 mil bases, that's a pretty good play that can basically answer some of the things that the Death Guard player wants to do to you. And we also have Fuegan, right? Who can allow Fire Dragons to hit big targets like Knights for multiple turns of value. So you can, shoot, get out of your Wave Serpent, shoot, and then get back in with Aspect Host or War Host. And that's going to be really the only way that the Aeldari can trade up against those Knight armies, because we're super fragile. And if we commit too much to one Knight, and even if we kill it, right, we will lose pretty much our whole army in return, right? Like, for example, if we have 15 Dark Reapers on our list and we shoot 15 Dark Reapers at a Knight, and we also, cast Doom on it, and we also do, the stratagems that we need to do and stuff like that, and then we charge it with Howling Banshees and Janezar, yes, we might kill that Knight, but we're going to lose pretty much everything we've exposed. And Fire Dragons are really only good into this meta because outside of this meta, I don't know if you guys remember when the Eldar Codex came out, but we didn't really have a good way of utilizing 10 Fire Dragons with Fuegan because nobody was running that many vehicles, right? The change in the meta occurred when Imperial Knights got huge point decreases, Chaos Knights got their Codex with point decreases, and Death Guard came out. And Death Guard are obviously really undercosted for what they do. So essentially, when those three armies came out and started dominating tournaments, Eldari players were able to adapt because we happen to have a good tool against those armies. Typically speaking, 10 Fire Dragons and Fuegan aren't good into much else besides armies that have more than 3 or 4 tanks in them, right? And even then, right, if you do the math, if your opponent has 3 ball predators, for example, or 3 predator annihilators, and you kill each and every one of them with a squad of fire dragons, you're still not trading up for the points. So, yeah, again, dragons taken in huge squads like that weren't that efficient outside of the meta. Having said that, here are the rumored nerfs that I've been taking a look at over the past 15 hours. Now, I will also say this. When I first saw these, I was very upset. I was annoyed. I was frustrated. I was honestly feeling like my mind was just going berserk because it's just too much. We've been nerfed so much. We've been nerfed again and again and again and again since the Codex has come out. We've seen nothing but nerfs to our favorite units, and it's getting exhausting, honestly. So, here are the nerfs. Fire dragons are supposedly going up 10 points for 5. So there'll be 130 points for 5 dragons and 240 for 10. Which to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense because, you know, dragons are already expensive at 120 and they're very fragile. So yeah, they're extremely expensive now. I know they get the rerolls, and the rerolls are good, don't get me wrong, but dragons can and do often fail when they're in squads of 5. Like, I've had situations where I've shot 5 fire dragons with Fuegan, by the way, at something as minimal as a castigator, and I have failed to do even 1 damage to it. And yeah, it was bad rolls, but it was also, you know, just the fact that they can pop smoke. You know, Imperial vehicles have ways to mitigate the effectiveness of anti-tank units like fire dragons. So they're going up in points. Swooping Hawks are going up 15 points for a max unit, so their minimum squad size is staying the same. The max unit is going up 15 points. I think we all know who ran 3 units of 10 Swooping Hawks at the WTC. And, you know, this has probably been noted by GW. They think it's too OP, of course, so they have to nerf the unit. Warp Spiders are up 10 points per 5, and I don't think the max unit is going to change. I think it's going to remain the same. But small squads of Warp Spiders are getting a significant points nerf. This is about a 10% points nerf here. Fuegan is going to go up 10 points as well. Personally, I think Fuegan is fine. Yet, right? He's already, one of the only characters who can buff fire dragons to the point where they can guarantee kill a tank. But he's going to go up in points. Part of me does understand it, but part of me doesn't, because, yeah, he gets the 2-up revive thing, so he gets a second life, essentially. But without his fire dragon unit, he's really not that good. But anyway, yeah, Fuegan's going up 10. And the Wave Serpent, for some odd reason, is going up 15 points. And this was the most shocking rumor to me, because the Wave Serpent is not that good. And let me put it in perspective for you. A lot of other players will say, what are you talking about? The Wave Serpent's great. The Wave Serpent is the only tank we have that can carry 10 models or more. It does have -1 to wound against weapons that are a higher strength. But at the end of the day, it's still toughness 9, and it's still going to die to most dedicated anti-large fire. We can give it Fire and Fade, that is true. But obviously, Fire and Fade is just D6 + 1. So, you know, most of the time, if your opponent's able to draw a beat on the Wave Serpent, it's dead. Now, if you're good with your positioning and it can stay safe the entire game, it's just the same exact thing as any other transport, right? Except that it's bigger than other transports. And, you know, with the larger size comes greater vulnerability. And I've played Wave Serpents in many a game. They're big, they're obnoxious, they're hard to move around sometimes, and if you don't get the Star Engines roll that you're looking for, oftentimes it can lead you to be in a vulnerable position. On the other hand, Space Marine vehicles, Imperial Guard transports, and I'm mainly talking about transports here, by the way, orc transports, whatever faction you're going to look at, their transport may be a little bit more fragile or maybe about the same durability, but they're all cheaper. Impulsors are 80 points. Chimeras are like 80 points. The Devilfish is like, I think, 85 points, right? All of these transports are extremely cheap, and they're about 40 points less than the Wave Serpent was, and now they're going to be pretty much 55 points cheaper than a Wave Serpent because they are going up to 140. Yes, guys, 140 points for a Wave Serpent, something that rarely gets to shoot its weapon because it's going to be remaining hidden for most of the game. And if it does get to shoot its weapon, the weapon is a single twin-linked Bright Lance and a single Shuriken Cannon. It has absolutely no offensive capabilities. It is literally just a transport that is used to hop in and out of all game. That's it. It is a medium, nothing more, which for 15 points extra does not make a whole lot of sense. And I have to say, I think this is a very weird nerf. Because if you're trying to nerf the detachment that can allow you to get in and out of a transport, then just nerf the detachment rule or something, right? Just nerf the stratagem. Don't nerf the Serpent itself, because this makes it so the Serpent isn't as good in other detachments. Actually, ironically, this hurts Spirit Conclave perhaps the most, because Spirit Conclave wants to run Wraiths, but unfortunately Wraiths are just not really that good right now. One of the things that can potentially help Wraiths is Wave Serpents, because Wraiths with Battle Focus can fade back into a Wave Serpent. And now, because Wave Serpents are more expensive, that's no longer a really viable strategy. Because as you guys know, Wraiths aren't really that good at the moment. So, ironically, this hurts other detachments more than it does War Host and Aspect Host. And you're probably not going to use Wave Serpents in some of the other detachments anyway, but yeah. Wave Serpents, weirdly nerfed. I just don't understand it. I know a lot of players were bringing Wave Serpents, but that is only because people were bringing squads of 10 Fire Dragons to deal with the ridiculousness that was Chaos and Imperial Knights. Literally, that's it. So, again, like I said, when I heard these nerfs, I was very upset. I was distraught. I was tired. I was just there's a nerf fatigue that is setting in with me that is impossible to shake, right? Because every time there's a Dataslate, every time I start to get used to the points changes, there's another group of points changes, and they're all bad. Like, there's not really a lot of positives. Now, what I hope to see, there are no rumored buffs for the Eldar. 0 rumored buffs. Which, if that happens and the Eldar just take an L, a big fat L, I will be extremely displeased. Because you can't nerf a bunch of stuff and then turn around and not buff any of the units that aren't performing well. Again, these are just rumors, so we'll have to see. Some of the buffs, weirdly enough, weren't in the rumors last time as well. So maybe that's something that the, leaker, whoever leaked the information, just kind of left out for the Eldar. Okay, so how does this affect us, right? Because we can look at these nerfs and maybe 1 or 2 of them don't seem that bad, but what are they in the grander context of the game? Well, first of all, the famous Fuegan Bang boat is destroyed. I don't think there's a universe where the Fuegan Bang boat survives this. It just went up by 45 points and is even more inefficient against armies that are light on vehicles, which is going to be something that we're going to be seeing more and more of because Knights are going up in points, Death Guard are going up in points, Chaos Knights are going up in points. They're all going to get nerfed, and that means less people are going to play those armies because, of course, flavor of the month. By the way, Death Guard players out there who literally just picked up the army because it's good in 10th edition, prepare to meet your maker because If these rumors are true about the Eldar, the Death Guard rumors are going to be true, and that means your Death Guard are going to get smashed. So good luck. Anyway, so we're going to see a lot more armies that are lighter on vehicles, and I think we're going to return back to a more heavy infantry style meta, which will favor certain units over others, and it's definitely not going to favor Fuegan and the Bang Boat. Now, I will say this. I watched several competitive games in the WTC World Team Championship, I should say, and it was fantastic. I loved watching the Eldar games. Particularly, I liked watching Liam VSL because he was running a wild list with 30 Swooping Hawks in it, which was crazy. But of course, this is a team tournament, so he had a list devised to go up against particular types of opponents. His list just went up by 100 points. And that's a really strange thing to me because it looks like GW just looked at the WTC lists and they just nerfed the Eldar based on those changes or based on those lists and made changes based on it. Which is, again, 100% really wacky because those armies are designed for team play. And team play works a lot differently than singles play. So all of these nerfs really make no sense if GW just looked at that tournament as an indicator of what they should nerf. And it's also important to note that Aeldari didn't dominate the WTC championship. They just didn't, right? Everybody watching that tournament, you probably saw the games. They were either close. Like, I didn't see a single Eldar game. I mean, I could be wrong, right? But I didn't see a single Eldar game that was like a 20-0. Every single Eldar game that I watched was fairly close. It was within 20 points. Again, that could just be me. Maybe somebody saw a different stream or saw a different game of Eldari where they did really well. But, I think they just did okay in WTC. They definitely didn't dominate. I don't think you could make the argument that they dominated the whole event. Now, I do think, unfortunately, these nerfs mean that Aspect Host and War Host are about to just skyrocket to the moon in points. They're going to go up by anywhere between 60 and 100 points, which will translate to about one unit being dropped from your army, either a unit of Corsairs, a unit of Rangers, or perhaps if you're more on the heavy side of Aspect Warriors, perhaps even a unit of Warp Spiders. So if you're running 3 units of Warp Spiders, sorry, now you're running 2 units of Warp Spiders. And yeah, that's pretty tough. And other lists outside of Aspect Host and War Host are probably also going to go up anywhere from 20 points to 50 points, which means they're going to become a lot less efficient as well because they're going to have to swap out their Aspect Warrior units for other things that are cheaper. Maybe, a squad of Fire Dragons has to be swapped out for a unit of Swooping Hawks or has to be swapped out for a War Walker or something like that, right? It's not the end of the world, don't get me wrong, but it is going to become less efficient in the tasks that those Aspect Warriors were needed in. So now the only exception to this, by the way, is Guardian Battle Host, because Guardian Battle Host is one of those unique special rainbows that is untouched by these changes, virtually untouched. They don't really like to run a lot of Wave Serpents. They don't really run Wave Serpents. They don't really run a whole lot of Aspect Warriors besides Dire Avengers, which didn't get touched and also aren't that good. And support weapons didn't get touched either. So their D-cannons and everything, they're just fine. The D-cannons are in. Guardian Battle Host has virtually escaped almost every single nerf. And of course, the only aspects that Guardian Battle Host uses, mainly Howling Banshees for fights first, didn't get touched either. And I do predict that Guardian Battle Host will soon become the new meta army along with Wind Rider Host. Wind Rider Host also, guys, just became fantastic because they had a real problem dealing with armies like Death Guard, who had insane indirect fire, who had insane levels of toughness and durability for the cost. and now that's about to change. So Wind Rider Host is actually looking pretty good. Also, Wind Riders have always kind of been a strong army, but we're going to start seeing a lot more heavy infantry come back into the meta. People are going to be more comfortable fielding a lot more infantry, and Wind Riders are really good at taking out infantry. So I do think Wind Riders are on the rise, and I also think Guardian Battle Host is probably going to be in a pretty dominant position. So how do we adapt? What changes can we make in our lists to adapt to potentially the new meta that we're going to be fighting in? Well, weirdly enough, Dark Reapers remain untouched. They did not bad touch Dark Reapers. Dark Reapers remain the same cost, even though they're freaking impossible to find, and I'm still looking for Dark Reapers, guys. I'm still looking for freaking Dark Reapers after all this time, and they're still not available. But if you do have Dark Reapers, or you went to China for your Dark Reapers and found them in a Chinese market, which I'm about to do very soon because I just can't find them anywhere else, they're going to be even better after the nerfs to Knights and Death Guard. They trade way better against things that don't, have 5-up invols all over the place and have, very, tough profiles and stuff like that. They do way better against that. There's a lot less anti-large units as well out there, which means that instead of investing in Wave Serpents, we can invest in Falcons. Falcons might actually be making a comeback because we don't have to worry about 3 Predator Annihilators on the other side of the field wrecking our tanks as soon as they poke out of cover, right? So Falcons are 130 points, Predator Annihilators are 135. People are going to take less Predators and less Lancers in general because those models are not favorable in non-large metas. So really, the reason why you guys are seeing so many people taking a bunch of Lancers and a bunch of Annihilators and Ballistus Dreadnoughts and all that other crap is because of Knights. So I think Falcons might make a comeback. So Falcons with Reapers and Malgren Raw, really good package. It was a good package in the current meta, and I think it's going to be even better in the future meta. I'm even seeing, it depends what they do, obviously, but having Falcons with, things like Harlequins could also be something. So we talked about that a little bit earlier in a previous video, that Harlequins are actually a really good unit to have in Falcons because they're really good against heavy infantry and stuff like that, right? So you give them the Harlequin's Kiss or the swords, and you have dev wounds, and you get to reroll the wounds with your Harlequins and throw grenades. So they are very good against high value, very tough targets. Shining Spears are also looking to be a pretty good replacement for Fire Dragons against transports and lighter vehicles because unlike Fire Dragons, Shining Spears can charge and, kind of engage units that are behind pieces of terrain. So because you're able to take the offensive to your opponent's transports and stuff like that very early in the game, that's going to put your opponent on the back foot, and it's going to give you more time to set up on your opponent afterwards. So your faster units have a little bit more time to set up, and you don't have to rely so much on having to kill like 3 or 4 tanks a game. You might have to kill 1 or 2 transports in this, upcoming meta because no one's really going to be playing as much Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, in my honest opinion. I may be wrong, but I think Shining Spears are a decent alternative if Fire Dragons go up in points. And again, Shining Spears aren't perfect. There's a lot of Shining Spear counters out there like Heroic Intervention with a Fights First unit and stuff like that. But if you're careful with the Shining Spears, if you're good on their positioning and stuff, you should be able to get some good value out of them. Also, big unit of Hawks can easily be replaced with smaller units of 5 and still be good due to the reduction of mega tough units in the meta. So we don't need to worry so much, like I said, about Chaos Knights and stuff like that. So running 30 Swooping Hawks or 25 Swooping Hawks or 20 Swooping Hawks, whatever you guys are running, may not actually be needed because there's going to be a lot more heavy infantry in the meta, and Hawks are not really good against, your bog standard heavy infantry. They're better against things that have 2-up armor saves and invul saves and stuff like that, right? And we're also seeing Death Guard Death Shrouds go up in points. We're probably going to see, Plague Marines maybe get increased by a little bit. All the bloat drones are probably going up in points and stuff like that. So we're going to see a lot of the Death Guard units increase. And I'm guessing, after looking at a lot of the things that the meta lists are taking, Death Guard armies are probably going up 250 on average. So that's going to be fun for them. Yeah, so Hawks can be replaced as well. Spiders, it's unfortunate that spiders are getting nerfed. I really don't think they need a nerf. I think GW needs to leave spiders the fuck alone. But, I think running a squad of spiders as a squad of Hawks instead. So if you have 3 spiders, maybe swap out a squad of spiders for a squad of 5 Hawks. I think that's also a good replacement. And, Hawks can basically do the same thing. Not quite as well as Warp Spiders, but on most board layouts, they can pretty much do exactly the same thing. And they can throw a grenade while they're at it, right? With their Swooping Hawk grenade pack. And that's basically it, guys. I think you can easily see people kind of biting the bullet on the Wave Serpent because some lists will just have to continue to run a Wave Serpent. Even at 140, it's an absolute disgrace. But we can see people running either one Wave Serpent with 10 Reapers in it or a Falcon with 5 Reapers and Malgan Raw. And we can see some really good results out of that. I think Warhost lists will probably run both Malgan Raw and 5 Reapers and 10 Reapers with maybe an Autarch out of a Wave Serpent and a Falcon respectively. And we don't really need that many Fire Dragons, right? Fire Dragons are considerably more expensive. You may see one squad of them in an army, and they may be kind of a flex unit just in case your opponent has something really tough, right? But other than that, they're just not really needed in a lot of situations. So I don't think you're going to be seeing those massive squads of 10 Fire Dragons anymore because the meta is just not going to be good with them. So yeah, Fire Dragons, really good unit. You can probably still run a couple units as, units of 5 or whatever. Or maybe you can even get away with just running one unit to, do some damage to a really heavy tank before finishing it off with something else. But yeah, I think we do have room to adapt. And I think, after I kind of cooled off a little bit from, the spiciness that was coming from the set of rumors that I was so angry about, I think we'll be fine. And I think we'll still be in a good spot in the meta. I think we just have to adapt our units a little bit and play around the things that got nerfed because we still have a lot of good stuff in the codex. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my patrons and supporters who've supported the channel over the last 3 years. Yes, it's been almost 3 years, and actually, I'm just going to say it's been 3 because we're so close now that it's basically, already been 3 years. So it's awesome. We've grown a considerable amount, and it's because of you guys helping and, with your comments and just, making the channel better and stuff like that. We also do have a channel Discord. If you want to join, you just have to join a Patreon free trial, which again, totally free. It's just a free trial. You could always cancel after for no cost to you and have access to our Discord where you can talk to Eldar players and enthusiasts about the changes and about, some tactics, advice, or even hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description below. I also have an Eldar Knights Fandex project that I'm currently working on with an artist, and we're getting a lot done together. The art is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, guys. I do have a video up on the channel about it, but we have pretty much weekly or sometimes even more than weekly, bi-weekly or tri-weekly updates via what we're working on with the Fandex, and we do have a Kickstarter for the Fandex, and I'll leave that in the description as well if you're interested in getting more information on it. Lastly, I do have a channel store page with Eldar-inspired apparel that you can get with Eldar runes on it and stuff like that are pretty low-key but still really cool if you want to rep them at your local game store and show off your Eldar pride. Or if you want to grab some discounted Eldar minis on Amazon, you can go ahead and check out the Amazon affiliate link, although I don't think there's much left nowadays because the Eldari stock has just dried up considerably since the Codex has come out. So anyway, though, have a good one, you guys. Peace out, and I'll see you guys next time. See you later.